Chair I always sat in at family dinners was the one with the wobbly leg. Nobody said it was mine. It just became mine, the way certain things do when you're the one nobody's fighting over. I'm the younger daughter. My brother is the oldest, steady, dependable, the kind of man who shows up on time and never makes anyone uncomfortable. My sister is in the middle, beautiful in that effortless way that made my mother beam whenever they walked into a room together. And then there was me, the one who wanted to work with her hands. The one who dropped out of her business degree junior year to apprentice at a furniture shop in Asheville, North Carolina, while everyone else was getting internships and LinkedIn profiles. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that phone call. My father said, "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed." Which was worse? What they didn't know, what I didn't fully know yet myself, was that I had found the only thing that ever made my hands stop shaking. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. My father built a decent life selling commercial real estate. Nothing flashy, but solid. We had a 4-bedroom house with a screened porch, 2 cars in the driveway, and a vegetable garden my mother kept mostly for show. My father also inherited 42 acres of land outside of Maryville from his uncle. Rolling pasture, an old equipment shed. A creek that ran cold even in August. He always said he'd build something on it someday. He never did. When I was 26, my brother opened a restaurant. He'd been talking about it for years, a farm-to-table place in the Bearden neighborhood, the kind with exposed brick and a chalkboard menu. My parents gave him $80,000. Just like that. A check at Sunday dinner, a toast with the good wine. My mother crying happy tears while she squeezed his face between both palms. I sat at the wobbly-legged chair and drank my water and smiled. 3 months later, I asked my father for a loan. Not a gift. A loan. $15,000 to buy better equipment for the small custom furniture pieces I'd been making in a rented garage space. I had orders. I had a waiting list. I had a plan typed out in a 12-page document that I printed and spiral-bound from the office supply store on Kingston Pike. My father read 4 pages of it. I watched his eyes slow down around page 3. He said, "This is a hobby, sweetheart. Your brother's building something real." My mother nodded from across the table without looking up from her phone. I drove home with the spiral-bound document on the passenger seat and didn't cry until I was parked in my own driveway. I want to be honest here, because this is the part people always want to skip over. The part where it wasn't romantic. It wasn't a movie montage. It was just hard. I kept the garage space for another 8 months and then lost it when the landlord sold the building. I moved my equipment into a storage unit that smelled like motor oil and mouse droppings and worked there with a space heater pointing at my ankles through the winter. My boyfriend at the time, kind man, genuinely kind, started looking at me differently around month 4, not with cruelty, just with a particular sadness that meant he'd already decided something. He left in February. He said I was too far inside my own world. He wasn't wrong. I just thought that was a feature, not a flaw. I sold pieces through an Etsy shop I ran off my phone. Small things at first. Cutting boards, floating shelves, a set of nesting boxes I designed with hand-cut dovetails that took me 2 days each. Then someone from Nashville bought a coffee table and posted it on their Instagram and something cracked open. I had 47 messages in 4 days. I didn't sleep. I worked, photographed, replied, packed, shipped, repeated. By March, I'd made $11,000 in a single month. I didn't tell my family. My father called me on a Tuesday in April, which was unusual. He was a Sunday call man. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the land outside Maryville." I sat up straighter without knowing why. "The old equipment shed out there. Nobody's using it. It's yours if you want it. Temporary. Just to get yourself sorted." That was how he said it. To get yourself sorted. Like I was a box of tangled Christmas lights. I said thank you and drove out the next morning. The shed was 60 by 40 feet, wood frame, tin roof. It leaked in 2 places. The floor was packed dirt and cracked concrete. The electrical panel was from 1987. There were wasp nests in both upper corners and a family of raccoons living behind the old workbench. I stood in the middle of it and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I hired an electrician first. His name was Ray, a big, quiet man in his 50s who'd done work on half the farms in Blount County. He looked at the panel, looked at me, looked at the panel again. "You sure about this?" he said. "Yes," I said. He shrugged and started writing up the estimate. I won't walk through every repair because that isn't really the point. The point is that I did it. I pulled permits the right way. I had the county inspector out twice. I sealed the roof myself with help from my friend Gwen, who was the only person who came out there in those first months without being asked. Gwen would show up on Saturday mornings with 2 coffees and work gloves and no commentary. That kind of friendship is rare. I want to say that clearly. By September, I had a functioning workshop, insulated walls, proper lighting, a dust collection system I'd bought used from a cabinet shop in Greenville that was closing down. I named the business Ridgeline Workshop. I'd been using that name on Etsy already, but it felt different once there was a place that matched it. My father drove out in October. He didn't call first. I heard tires on gravel and looked out through the open bay doors and saw his truck. He stood at the edge of the gravel for a moment, just looking. I kept working. He walked in slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, and made his way around the perimeter without saying much. He stopped at a walnut dining table I was finishing, 8 feet long, waterfall edge, the grain matching across the seam so precisely it looked like one unbroken piece of wood. "You did this," he said. "Yes." He was quiet for a long time. He didn't say anything else important that day, but he came back. He came back in November and again in January, and he never called ahead. He would just show up, walk around, watch. Sometimes he'd hand me a clamp I was reaching for. That was all. My sister called me in February of the following year. We were not close, not estranged, just distant in the way of people who have nothing much in common and don't force it. She was married by then, living in a subdivision outside Chattanooga. Her husband worked in insurance. "Mom says you're doing well," she said in a tone that made the word well sound like a question. "I'm doing okay," I said. "She says Dad drives out there sometimes." "Yeah." A pause. "Good for you," she said, and I could not tell if she meant it. I chose to believe she did. What I want to tell you about is the February night 2 years in when I was finishing an order. A set of 6 dining chairs for a couple in Brentwood, and I got a message from someone who'd seen my work on a design blog in New York. They were opening a boutique hotel in Greenville, South Carolina. They wanted to talk about custom furniture for 12 rooms. I sat in the shop alone, the space heater humming, sawdust on my jeans, and I read that message 4 times. I didn't call my parents. I called Gwen. She screamed loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear, and I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the floor. That's the moment I remember most. Not a ceremony or a grand reveal. Just me on the concrete floor of a tin roof workshop, laughing in the dark. The hotel contract was real. It took 6 months to complete 16 pieces total, custom dimensions, all in white oak with blackened steel hardware. It was the most technically demanding work I'd ever done, and there were nights I doubted whether I could pull it off. But I did. And the hotel photographed everything for their website, and 3 other hospitality groups reached out within 60 days. I had to hire help. I brought on 2 people. A woodworker named Sam, who'd been doing production furniture and wanted to do something more meaningful, and a young woman just out of trade school named Petra, who turned out to have better eye for grain matching than anyone I'd worked with. We got crowded in the shed fast. I started thinking about space. My father came out on a Wednesday in November. I remember because I'd just gotten off a call with a commercial real estate attorney and was still holding my notes. He walked in, looked at the 3 of us working, looked at the stacked orders on the whiteboard, and stood there a long time. "You need more room," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at the window, at the 42 acres of pasture beyond it. Neither of us said anything. He called me 2 weeks later on a Sunday, which was back to normal, and he said he'd been talking to his attorney. He wanted to deed me the land, all 42 acres, and he wanted to help me build a proper facility on it. A real building, not the old shed, though I could keep that for storage. He said he was sorry it had taken him so long to understand what I was doing out here. I held the phone against my ear and looked at the walnut shavings curled on the floor around my boots. "Dad," I said. "Let me finish," he said. He had a list. He'd written things down. He talked for a long time about the money he'd given my brother, about how he'd looked at that and looked at me and told himself he was being practical, that he was protecting me from myself. He said he'd been wrong. He said watching me work out here, watching me build something from nothing, had changed something in him that he couldn't quite name. My brother's restaurant had closed 18 months earlier. Supply chain problems, then staffing, then the margins just stopped working. My parents helped him through it. I don't begrudge that. But my father said it out loud on that Sunday phone call. "You took nothing and built something. I gave your brother everything," and he stopped himself. "It's okay," I said. "It's not," he said. "But I'd like to try to do better. I want to tell you what happened at Thanksgiving, that year, because this is the part people always ask about. My mother planned it at the family house in Knoxville, the usual setup. The good china, the tablecloth she irons every year, the green bean casserole nobody really likes but nobody stops making. My sister drove in from Chattanooga with her husband and their daughter. My brother came alone. He was working at another restaurant now, front of house management, a different kind of thing. He seemed quieter. I think the closing had knocked something loose in him that hadn't settled back yet. I came straight from the shop. I'd cleaned up. Real clothes. Hair washed. Boots without sawdust. I want to be specific about that because I remember deliberately making that choice. I was not going to give anyone anything to look at. I brought a dish. A sweet potato gratin I'd learned from a woman at the farmer's market in Maryville who made it with a little smoked paprika and sharp cheddar. People can be skeptical of new dishes at Thanksgiving, but this one wins people over. We sat down. My father said grace, which he doesn't always do, but that year he did. And at the end, he added something that wasn't part of his usual form. He said he was grateful for everyone at the table, and grateful to have learned something this year about what it means to build something with your hands. My mother looked at him. My sister looked at me. My brother looked at his plate. After dinner, my brother found me on the screened porch. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his hands in his pockets, the same way my father stands. "Dad told me about the land," he said. "Yeah," I said. "Are you?" He stopped. Started again. "Are you good out there? Like, really?" "Really," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "That's good." And I think he meant it. I really do. My brother is not a bad person. He was handed an easier road and he took it the way most people would. The harder thing is admitting that the easier road sometimes leads you somewhere you didn't mean to go. The deed was transferred in January. My father's attorney drew up the paperwork and we signed it on a Tuesday afternoon in a conference room in Knoxville, my father in his good coat, me in a sweater I'd had since college. His hand shook a little when he signed. Mine didn't. We drove out to the land afterward, both of us, in our separate trucks. We stood at the edge of the pasture in the January cold and looked at the slope of it, the way the land folded down toward the creek and then rose again into the tree line. "What are you going to build?" he said. I told him. I had drawings. Not professional architectural drawings yet, just my own sketches on graph paper. The main building footprint, the lumber drying shed, the covered outdoor workspace, where I'd eventually want a small showroom attached to the front. I had talked to a local contractor. I had a rough timeline. My father listened to all of it without interrupting, which was new. When I finished, he said, "You're going to need a good well." "I know," I said. "I've already talked to a driller." He laughed. Just a small sound, surprised out of him. "Of course you have," he said. The facility broke ground in March. It's not finished yet, as I write this. We're maybe 4 months out from being able to move operations fully into the new space. But we're getting there. Sam and Petra are both still with me. We've taken on 2 more people. We're booked 8 months out. My mother came out to see the construction in April. She walked a footprint of the new building with her arms crossed. her coat buttoned all the way up against the wind, looking at everything carefully. She didn't say much for a long time. Then she said, "The windows on the south wall. Are those going to be big enough for the light you need?" I looked at her. "I just think you'd want good light," she said, a little defensively. "They're 10 feet tall," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "Good." It wasn't an apology. I know that. But it was something. My mother is not a woman who apologizes easily. She finds other ways to say what she means, and you have to learn the language. I've been learning it my whole life. That question about the windows was the closest thing to "I'm proud of you" that I was going to get that day, and I decided to take it. I still have the spiral-bound business plan. It's in a drawer in the old shed, a little warped from the humidity. The paperclip on the cover has rusted. I don't take it out very often, but I know it's there. There is a particular satisfaction in having built something that people can walk into and stand inside of and touch with their hands. Not a number on a screen, not a pitch deck, something with weight and grain and joinery, something that will outlast me. That's what I make. That's what I've always made. I used to think I needed my family to see that. I used to believe that their recognition was somehow part of what would make it real. I drove myself half crazy in the early years waiting for that, for some sign that I was on the right path, some version of the toast and the good wine that my brother got. What I know now is this: the work was real long before anyone else said so. The work was always real. The land is mine. The building going up on it is mine. The name on the business is mine. And every piece I make, every table, every chair, every joint cut by hand and fit together with something close to love, every one of those things is proof that the only validation I ever actually needed I was already giving myself. I just didn't know it yet. I've thought a lot about what made the difference. Not in a grand way, not some sweeping conclusion I arrived at on a mountaintop. More like something I kept bumping into. The way you keep stubbing the same toe in the dark until finally you turn the light on. What made the difference was not talent. I know people more naturally gifted than me who are still waiting for someone to hand them permission. What made the difference was not luck, though there was some. What made the difference, the real thing, the thing underneath everything, was that I kept going when it would have been much easier and far more socially acceptable to stop. That sounds simple. It isn't. When my father sat across from me and said the words, "This is a hobby," he wasn't being cruel. He believed it. And part of me, the part that had spent 20-some years inside that family, learning whose opinions carried weight and whose didn't, that part of me almost believed it too. That's the insidious thing about being dismissed by people you love. It doesn't feel like an attack, it feels like a correction. I think about the version of me that took that correction, that folded up the spiral-bound plan, put it in a drawer, went back to finish the business degree, got a respectable job somewhere with a 401k and a parking spot. I think about her sometimes with genuine compassion, because she would have been fine. Fine is not nothing. Fine gets you through. But fine wasn't going to get me to that walnut table, 8 feet long, gray matched across the seam. Fine wasn't going to get me to that concrete floor, laughing with Gwen in the dark at midnight, 47 messages from strangers who wanted something I'd made. There's a version of cause and effect that most people understand. Work hard, get results. But there's a deeper version that takes longer to see. The choices that feel smallest in the moment, staying in the storage unit through another cold month, pulling the permit the right way instead of the easy way, calling the well driller before anyone told me to. Those choices compound. Not immediately. Not in ways you can measure on a Tuesday, but they build something in you that eventually becomes visible to the world, whether the world was looking or not. My father drove out to that workshop in October and stood in front of a table I'd made with my own hands and said, "You did this." That question changed something between us. Not because I needed his approval to keep going. By then I didn't, not really. But because it meant he was finally seeing something true. And there is a real and human satisfaction in being seen accurately by someone who once saw you wrong. I won't pretend otherwise. Gwen showed up every Saturday without being asked. Sam and Petra showed up and did work worth being proud of. My mother asked about the windows like it was a practical question, not an apology, and I chose to hear what she actually meant. These are the quiet textures of a life that's going in the right direction. Not one dramatic moment, but 100 small ones lining up. The land is 42 acres. There's a building going up on it. There are 10-foot windows on the south wall. I turned a light on. That's all. I just turned the light on and kept walking.